All right, friends, it's time to talk all things podcasting. From how to get started and found by others to having a super efficient process that eliminates all the time-consuming tasks. If you have a podcast or are thinking of starting one, this episode is for you. You're listening to the Badass is the New Black podcast. I'm Krissy Chin, your host, here to teach you how to build an online business that you love and in a way that allows you to work a little bit less so you can enjoy a whole lot more. My hope is that you've showed up to today's episode ready to learn something new and will be inspired to take imperfect action in your business right away. I won't make you wait any longer. Let's dive in. I have a really exciting new guest here. Starting from zero, Samantha Lee Wright analyzed, strategized, and bootstrapped her way into podcasting frame. With no connections and a shoestring budget, her own podcast, The Essential Oils Revolution, skyrocketed to success, becoming the world's top podcast in its category in a matter of weeks after launching. Samantha Lee Wright is not only the master of her platform, but a passionate teacher of the podcasting medium, leading the next generation of podcasters into the future with clarity and confidence with her new book, Pineapple Podcasting. Samantha, I'm so excited that you're here. And it's weird. I call you Sam.
That's totally fine.
I'm like, wait a minute. I know her as Sam. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm really excited about the topic that we're going to talk about, which is podcasting.
Yes.
So we'll just dive right in. And I just want to had that little bio of getting started, but share with us a little bit of how you really got started in podcasting, why you got started in podcasting.
Yeah, sure. Well, cool. Well, thanks for having me here. I'm super excited. I think you and I could both talk about podcasting all day because it's really one of my favorite platforms to share any information with people to the world. As entrepreneurs, we have so many options as far as how we can get our voice out there. We've got all the social media platforms. You can make a YouTube channel. You can be a blogger. So many choices. For me, when I was just starting my business and I was thinking to myself, gosh, I have so much I want to share with people. How can I do that? What's the best way for me to do that? And I was like, well, I don't like being on video. I don't really like writing. I love podcasts. I love listening to audio. I love learning through listening. And so that was just a natural choice for me. And it really started from this realization that I couldn't be in more than one place at one time, right? At that point, I was doing my essential oil business kind of old school, just person to person, teaching a home class here and there. And there was only so many classes or people I could talk to in a day. And so podcasting was my way to magnify my message and say, well, I really want to reach more people with this thing that I'm passionate about. And so the Essential Oil Revolution podcast was born and it took off and it's been a blast ever since. We've been running for 5 years now. Can you believe it?
Oh my gosh. That long?
Yeah.
Time is flying because it doesn't feel like 5 years. I was, there and around and we've known each other for a long time, longer than that. But gosh, it doesn't seem like it's been 5 years since, I heard about you starting the podcast and that whole journey.
Yeah. It's kind of nuts.
Time is going by. I love that you were, kind of looking at the things okay, this is what I like. This is what I don't like. I don't like being on video, and of course, then I'm here forcing Sam to be on video. She texted me this morning. She's like, are we on video or just audio? I was like, oh, we're on video. She's like, okay. And now I find out she hates video.
Now I have to take a shower and put a bra on. This is why I like podcasting with no video.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've done a podcast episode without a bra on. I'm just going to say, wear a baggy sweatshirt. No one knows the difference.
It's no one knows if I got PJs or work pants on right now.
Right. Exactly. But yeah, so you kind of pulled the things that you do like, don't like. Gosh, I want to, reach more people at one time, maximize your efforts. And so podcasting seemed to be the right fit. And I would say that it fits you very well. Definitely. And you started and you do interviews on your podcast.
Right. Because that's another one of my strengths, I'd say. And that's part of when you are first getting started as an entrepreneur, you really want to play to your strengths. You want to see, where do I excel at? and where do I not so much excel at? And I love asking questions. Like me being on this side of the interview, not so much my favorite, but I love being on your side where I get to pick someone's brain and draw out those stories and draw out those interesting things that only that person knows. Like I love it. I could just, if you get me like a little tipsy at a party and sit down, make the mistake of sitting down next to me, I'll be like, where are you from? Who was your first love? What was your first job? Tell me about that. Where do you like to vacation? Like, I just love asking questions, and that's what I get to do all day on the podcast. So
I love that. That's actually like the best strategy to being successful in business is to ask a lot of questions, to get a lot of information, because then you get to know, your audience and what they want. And then, whether it's, in an interview or because you're saying that's your nature is just to ask questions. So I'm sure you learned very quickly what your people want to hear about, what they want to learn about. And then you set up the interviews, are giving them what they want. And then more people are excited to listen to what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. So getting started, did you get a bunch of fancy equipment to get started? Or did you, was it like phone and headphones? Like, tell me about that process of getting started. Because I know a lot of people, for one, dragged my feet on this idea of starting a podcast. I was like, I'm going to start one. And then I just kept asking people that I knew that had podcasts, what microphone are you using? And then they're telling me all this fancy equipment for sound and equalizers. I'm like, I don't even now I'm just overwhelmed. And now I'm making excuses on why I can't start because I think I need all this fancy stuff. So how did you start?
Yeah, I like to keep things really simple. And so when I, in my book where I'm teaching people how to get started, I specifically wrote it for people who were on a shoestring budget, because that's where I was when I first started. We had no extra funds. Like we started out, my story, Krissy, when I first started my business, me and my family were a family of 4. We were on food stamps. We were on government assistance. Like I had no extra money to be like, yeah, honey, I think I'll spend, $200 on a microphone because I want to start this podcast. It was like, no, every dollar counted. So I bought the ATR 2100, which at the time was a $40 microphone. It was just a USB microphone. So a USB mic just plugs directly into your laptop. I was fortunate enough to already own a laptop, so I didn't have to buy that. But I bought the $40 microphone. Now that podcasting has gotten more popular, that microphone is now $80.
Oh, wow.
But I've done a lot of research. There are still some really decent, like $30, $40 USB mics out there that the sound quality is going to be a little bit less than something like what I have right now. This is the HyperX. It's a $160 microphone. It's a little bit better. Honestly, the sound quality difference is not that big. So if you're first getting started, you can see what works for you, and you can get a decent mic for about $40. All you need from there is a laptop or a computer. And if you have a Mac, then you've already got GarageBand, which is like a free audio software that you can edit on. And then after that, you just need a hosting platform, which we were talking about that, Krissy, and all the options that are out there. But there's a lot of options to get started with hosting for free, or like $5 a month, or maybe $15 a month, just depending on your size. So I don't know, it's sounding complicated now, but it's really simple. You only need essentially a microphone and a computer, and the rest is figure outable from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So like with podcasting, I do video because I like to repurpose for YouTube, but you don't have to. So yeah, you don't have to shower and get all pretty for podcasting, which is sometimes the draw for people. And I would say, who should podcast? Someone who likes talking, right? Like if you don't like talking, either by, monologue style by yourself teaching through voice, or you don't like interviewing people and you don't like talking, then podcasting might not be for you. Maybe you should stick to blogging. But if you don't mind talking and you have a message to share and you want to get it out there, I think podcasting is great.
And I think every business has a message to share. Like even if businesses may focus more on a product or a service, like there's ways to turn that core value of what you offer into something that's teachable or entertaining. Not all podcasts have to be strictly educational.
Mm-hmm.
They can be entertaining, they can be humorous, they can be fiction. I love fiction podcasts too. So, and that's one thing I love talking about in my book and in the course I'm making, is we talk a lot about podcast for entrepreneurs and, business owners. But if you kind of take a step back and you look at the medium as a whole, it is an extremely creative medium. Like there's so many different types of podcasts out there, and you can get kind of weird with it, which I really like. I kind of encourage people to get a little bit weird with their podcast.
Mhm.
And that was one of the biggest pieces of advice that I got when I was first getting started and trying to decide, okay, I want to start a podcast. What exactly is it going to be about? I got the advice to niche down, niche down, niche down again, and then niche down again until it hurts. And I thought that was really interesting advice, but at the end, it really worked for me. I forced myself to niche down until it hurt. I not only started a health and wellness podcast, I started a health and wellness podcast solely focused on essential oils. Not only that, but focusing mostly on Young Living essential oils, which is just one brand of essential oil. So like making that choice to niche down that far, it did kind of hurt. I was like, oh my God, this is kind of limiting feeling. But as soon as you peel back and realize, no, this isn't limiting, this is just specific. I'm getting really specific about who my podcast is for. And once you do that, you start to learn why people are listening. And it makes every decision that you have to make from that point forward so much easier, because you already know who's listening, why they're listening, and what they want from you.
Mhm.
And I feel like for podcasters who are starting out and kind of making their shows a little more vague, it can be a little harder to make those decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Absolutely. And niching down. I love it. It was like niche down again, niche down again, niche down again. What did you say? Like till it feels
Till it hurt. Yeah.
Till it hurts. Yes. Till it hurts. And that's almost true for like business. And I talked about this in my Build a Blissful Business course, like niching down almost like so far that you're talking to one person, and then maybe you decide whether or not you need to back it up a little bit. But it's so true that whether it's with your brand and your business or your podcast, it provides so much clarity, like you said, to know exactly who you're talking to, and kind of circling back to me referencing before, like, your audience, what they want to hear about. So that makes it really clear on what your episodes are going to be about, whether it's you by yourself or interviewing someone else.
Yeah.
And draws in more people. So I think that's probably definitely why, your podcast, grew so fast, so quick, because, and I don't know how much competition you had, how many other podcasts out there that were in your niche. Do you know when you started?
At the time there was, I could count them on both hands. There weren't a ton of essential oil podcasts out there, although there's a ton of health and wellness podcasts out there that definitely have the occasional essential oil episode.
Mhm.
But as far as strictly essential oil podcasts, even to this day, there's, maybe a few dozen, not a ton of competition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where mine is like a podcast for coaches, creatives, network marketers. It's like, I'm amongst a lot of people out there. I've certainly found my tribe of people that love, coming and listening to these episodes, and are sending their friends, but, haven't grown nearly as big as Samantha, but, because you've got this niche. So I think that is super helpful. And I love that you've kind of given this permission to be you said weird as you want with your podcast. Like,
yeah, I know sometimes when people, at dinner parties are like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I have an essential oil podcast. They kind of give me this look of like, huh, that's kind of cool, but that's kind of weird. And I sort of have this feeling when I talk to strangers, that's like, I'm okay if you don't listen to my podcast. Like, it's not for everyone. And I feel super comfortable saying that it's not for everyone. It's for essential oil addicts. Like that's a very small category of people on this planet, but it's a big enough category for me to make a huge difference. So, I think it's okay to start small. It's so much easier to grow from small to big versus big to small, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. Okay. So anyone listening to this, has enough of a message because you are running a business to have a podcast. So if you like talking, you can consider podcasting. We know that you only need a microphone because it's audio. So like, we don't care what the image looks like, but they have to be able to hear you and hear you clearly. And no one wants to listen to an episode where it's like crinkly and it's like high volume, low volume. So I think that is kind of the most important, but Samantha's already told you that there are very affordable microphones out there to, get started with your podcast, and then something to record on. So you mentioned laptop or computer. I do know people that have started a podcast from their phone.
I can't imagine.
From their phone, but like the ability to do it, you can do it. If you're just doing audio, I mean, you can even do video on there, but phones these days are really good. So a pair of headphones, again, guys, my motto, done is better than perfect. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So if all you have is your cell phone and headphones to start your podcast, like, don't make any other excuses. Just start with it. Like, they can get better every episode.
And I think it's important, Krissy, to talk a little bit about starting a podcast from scratch versus you already have a business or a brand and your podcast is meant to be just an extension of your brand. That's a little bit different. That's a kind of a different approach. If you already have a brand, you already have a following, you already have people coming to you for advice or for a product or a service, then a podcast could just be an extension of that, a different way for your people to connect with you. And when you're doing it that way, I feel like you have a little bit more license to just, pick up your phone, plug in your earbuds and record a video that you would have recorded anyway, maybe for your YouTube channel, extract the audio, turn it into a podcast, and then tell people like, hey, prefer listening, go listen to the podcast. So that's like one approach that is totally legit, and you don't have to do it perfectly. It's just because people are already paying attention. Mm-hmm. But if you're trying to start a podcast that's kind of a new idea, you're trying to build a different kind of following there, then I highly recommend that you prioritize that really good sound quality. And 2 quick pieces of advice I can give for you that I had to learn the hard way starting out was every USB microphone that you're going to plug into your laptop, you're going to be able to change the input setting for that microphone. So I didn't know this when I first started. I just plugged it in and hit record and went. And then when I started sending it out for editing, I worked with a podcast editor and he was like, your input volume's way too high. You're blowing out the microphone, so it was just like way too loud. And so all it took was a click of a button for me to lower that input volume. Sounded so much better. And then the other piece of advice is if you are recording interviews with someone, usually nowadays people just record via Zoom or Skype, somehow online. There's just a setting that you can select in your system preferences to record on 2 different tracks. So your voice is going to be recorded on track 1. Your guest voice will be recorded on track 2. And so there's these 2 different audio tracks that you can edit separately. And it just makes editing so much easier. It makes the whole process so much easier. Cause like, let's say I'm talking here, Krissy, and I'm giving brilliant advice. And then you start having a sneeze attack or something, then you can cut out the sneezing part and no one would be the wiser because my voice is being picked up on a separate audio track than yours. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And you are the one that introduced me to that and like blew my mind because I think
so easy.
I think we were recording something else and something happened. It was like my kids, or I don't remember, but I was like, I really don't want to redo that. Like that was amazing, but my kids are like screaming in the background. You're like, oh, are you recording us on 2 tracks? And I was like, facepalm. No. What is that? Right? Tell me. Oh, it's just a feature on your Zoom. Oh my gosh. Mind blown. Amazing. And then I was thinking about another funny thing that I think I recorded probably, I don't know how many, 5 or 6 of my first episodes. I did get a fancy mic that was, I think it was around $100.
Okay.
To start my podcast. And so I'm recording my episodes. I'm like, yeah, I got a podcast. I'm like feeling super excited, recording my either solo or interview episodes. And I have this guy on who is amazing. And he's a video audio guy. And we get on and he goes, it doesn't sound like your mic is connected. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's troubleshoot this. Literally, it's like plugged in, but I hadn't gone and selected, under microphone, you can go to like select, and it just said built-in microphone. So it was pulling my voice into the computer microphone, and I have this like fancier microphone set up. And I was like, oh my gosh, another face palm.
I feel for you. I had a face palm moment on my show the other day. Like I said, I've been doing this for 5 years, Krissy, and it took me about a month and a half. So I recorded at least 5 or 6 interviews for my show where my microphone, for some reason, my Mac, I have a MacBook. They did some sort of update where they no longer let you select your input volume. It would like automatically adjust your input volume. So I'd be talking and all of a sudden my input volume on my mic would be going like up and down and up and down. And I didn't realize it for like a whole month and a half. But my assistant, she sort of like sound checks the episodes for me. She's like, Sam, your voice keeps going like really loud and then really low, like up and down and up and down. And I was like, that's weird. I don't know why. And it took me forever to figure it out. And I was like,
So what was the fix?
I just had to like re-update my computer and restart my computer. And then it just fixed it.
Oh, shit.
It's just the little things. But, it's so funny that I'm going to guess you didn't go back and re-record those 5 episodes, right?
No.
Because like you just said, done is better than not done, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I was being interviewed a week or so ago, and he asked me, so if people want to get started listening to Badass is the New Black podcast, where, what's your favorite episode? Where should they start? And I was like, I hate that I'm going to say this, but you guys should just start at the beginning, even though those are like my worst episodes.
Yeah. I go back. I had to go back through all of I have 260 something episodes now. And I did a project recently where we had talked about switching over to dynamic advertising, which I don't know if we want to get into that, if that would be helpful for you people. But because of this project, I had to go back and basically re-listen and re-edit through all of my beginning episodes. It was like torture. I was like, man, this is your own personal kind of hell here when you have to listen to your own voice this many times and listen to yourself. 5 years ago, when you were such a newbie, you really were terrible at interviewing and all these things. It was torture, but it was also really eye-opening to go like, wow, it's so true. Like you just don't wait till you're perfect. Do it scared. Mm-hmm. Do it scared. And because it's better to get it done, get started. There's no way you're going to learn this till you actually do it. And, you'll learn those little things along the way about like how to set up that 2-track recording, how to change your input volume. Like it's little stuff and you'll learn along the way. But every day that you don't start is a day that you're missing out, potentially reaching out to your people that want to hear from you so badly.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sam and I can both attest to the fact that it's going to suck a little bit when you get started and we will still listen to you if you send it over our way, and you will get better. I've gotten better. Sam has gotten better. So you will get better. You just have to start. What is your thoughts and recommendations I had one of my students that was like, we started the podcast, like, your inspiration from your podcast and starting, and then they read your book. I'm totally blanking on the title. Pineapple Podcasting. Yes, if you're seeing visuals, the Pineapple Podcasting. So they were like, I used Samantha's book to kind of get started. And they're like, we recorded our trailer. And I was like, oh, a trailer. Like, that sounds fancy. I don't have a trailer. Do you have a trailer for yours?
I don't have a trailer for mine now. If I had known what I know now, I definitely would have created a trailer in the beginning, because I'll tell you what trailers are amazing for. So for those that don't know, trailers are essentially like a movie trailer that you would make, but for your podcast. And they've kind of replaced what used to be known as episode 0. So episode 0 was kind of a thing, 5-6 years ago when podcasting was just becoming a big thing, where the host would do episode 0, which would be like, hey, my name's Sam and I'm about to start this podcast. Here's a little bit about me and here's what you can expect to tuning in. And I feel like that's a little outdated now. I'm kind of under the impression now that people just want to get to the content. They just want you to give it to them. Start out with the action, start out with the best guests and the great content. people don't really care about who you are yet. You know, you got to earn their trust a little bit, give them some good, valuable content, and then you can divulge a little bit more about yourself and why you started the podcast and all that. But what trailers do is essentially you make like an action trailer for your podcast, giving people a little bit of a teaser of what they can expect. And what's great about a trailer is that you can go ahead and set up your podcast on the technical side. You can go ahead and submit it to iTunes, which takes like a couple weeks sometimes to get approved. You can basically get everything set up in the background. If you've got that trailer up, locked and loaded, it allows people to go ahead and subscribe to your podcast before you even have an episode. So that, I think, is the true gold mine in a really good trailer. Is not only are you piquing people's interest and creating something shareable, but you're creating something that people can go ahead and subscribe, so that when your first episodes become ready to listen to, boom, you've already got a list of people subscribed for when that episode is released. So I love trailers, and I kind of wish I could go back and make one. I guess I could still make one for my podcast, but
I was just going to ask, should we go back and make trailers for our podcast?
Maybe we should. That would be fun.
It would be fun to like just create something, a little short snippet. And then I can say, start with the trailer, not my horrible, and then skip episode 1, which apparently I was supposed to have as episode 0, where it's like, what is, this podcast all about and who the heck am I?
Yeah.
Okay. So
that I just called you out for and said it's a bad idea. I'm sorry.
No offense taken. You guys, you know me. And if this is the first time listening, you'll get to know me, but I'm a done is better than perfect girl. I will just take action, and I'm not afraid to suck and be bad, because that's how you get better, right? Like no regret.
Yeah. That's how we got to where we are, Krissy. We weren't afraid to suck. So
yeah, exactly. Okay. So if you're just getting started, we already established that the first one's going to suck, but you can create a trailer, which is like the cool thing to do now for your podcast. It makes you like look and feel more official. What about an intro and an outro? I've changed mine multiple times. So give us your insight, since you're the guru here, on podcasting intros, outros. Should we have them? Shouldn't we have them? Should you record your own? Should you have someone else introduce you? Should you have music or not?
Right. I mean, it's so hard to answer that question, because truly nothing in podcasting is a one size fits all kind of a thing. So it's going to really depend on what kind of show you're going for. Me personally, I love a good intro jingle. If it's done well, if it's kind of clever, and if it's short, go for it. So when I was working with someone doing some coaching for someone starting a podcast, and their intro was literally 90 seconds long of basically just music. I was like, dude, no one's going to listen to, they're going to get past the music to get to the content. So keep it really short. Like 20 seconds is a good like average to shoot for if you are going to do kind of an intro jingle type of thing. Make it fun, but also make it very clear, like who this podcast is for, and get people a little excited about it. You don't have to have a jingle, honestly. Like if you want to just get right to the content, that's totally fine as well. I'm kind of I love having sort of a production layout of my show. It just makes it fun for me and makes it predictable for myself and my audience. So I always start my show out with a quote. I'm a quote geek. I love quotes. So just, any quote, I'll start out with that. And then I go into my intro music. And then I go into a little short and sweet what this podcast is going to be about. Then I share my favorite essential oil from the week. And then we pull a recipe out of our DIY dugout, which is recipes that have been submitted all from listeners. So it's really fun to share that and get some of that listener involvement to my show. And then we go into the interview. So it's starting out my show. It's usually like 3 to 4 minutes long before you actually get to the interview. For some people, that's too long. I know a lot of my biggest fans, they're like, yeah, honestly, Sam, I kind of just skip through to the interview. I'm like, that's fine. And then other people are like, I love the recipes every week, and I love hearing your favorite oil of the week. So there's kind of something for everyone. But at the end of the day, it so depends on the kind of show you're going for. Always if like you're ever asking yourself that question of, should I do a jingle? If so, what should it sound like? Just ask yourself, what would my avatar want? And your avatar is just, who is that ideal listener who's tuning into your show? Who are you trying to reach? And what do they want? And those kind of questions aren't always the easiest to answer, but I would encourage you to be creative with it and go listen to what else is possible. Go listen to other podcasts and see, what do you like? Like, I was listening to a show the other day, and like, she shared her favorite bottle of wine from that week in the beginning of the episode, like almost every week. And I was like, oh, that's like an interesting, clever idea. Some podcasts will take a sound bite from that show, and that's what they start their episode out with, which I think is really fun. It's a little time intensive, but it's a really fun, because it's a hook that gets people being like, ooh, I'm going to learn something amazing in this episode. And then boom, you've got a podcast jingle to start you out, and you're off and running. But I think jingles are really fun to make. And with all the stock audio stuff out there, you can have a lot of fun finding a jingle that really works for your brand. Just make sure that you buy royalty free, or you pay for the rights to use that song. Never, use a song that you don't own the rights to. That's a big no-no.
And Audio Jungle, are there any others that pop into your head in terms of finding that music?
I used Audio Jungle. So that's the one that I know the best. I can't really think of any other ones off the top of my head.
Yeah, same. Yeah, my intro has changed multiple times, and I definitely listen to others. So I love that recommendation. Go listen to other podcasts, maybe that are similar, maybe that are not, and just not to necessarily copy them per se, but to see what you like. Do you like that longer intro? What will your avatar like? Kind of thing. I've switched up. I had an intro that really, kind of told what it was about. And then I listened to Amy Porterfield's, and I was like, oh, hers is definitely like in depth, tells you like exactly who should be, who her audience is that should be listening. Kind of modified mine to be like that, sent it to my sister, and she was like, it's way too long. It's like 90 seconds. And I just basically wanted to skip through the whole thing. And I was like, thanks for the feedback, Claire. So it was that, but it was that for like a hot second. And then with the new season 3, I've done seasons. So we're on season 3. It's a new shorter version of not even really going into like who, but just like, hey, I hope you're here with an open mind. Like, let's get to learning kind of thing, jumping in. I do have music with it. I don't know. Maybe one day I'll have someone introduce me, but it's just me for now. It's easy.
Yeah,
it's
easy.
Changed it up.
If you want, I have a voiceover guy for mine, and I found him on Fiverr. So I spent like $5 to have someone read my script for my intro, and I love it. Like, it's this dude. He sounds very professional. Like, I remember when my friend started listening to my show, and she was like, "Man, Sam, I didn't know you were like getting a professional podcast going." Like, I heard that guy's voice, and I was like, "Damn, Sam's throwing down."
I think I did mention in my very first episode, but I was like, one day I'll probably have some Australian man introducing me to the audience. I love it. And now, and before, it used to just be music, intro, and jump right in. Again, I was a mixture of like doing my own episodes, interviews. Season 3 is, all interviews. So that's what you guys are listening to now. And now I've actually started after Sam and I finish recording, I'm going to take about 5 minutes and type up just a few sentences of like some exciting highlights from this episode. I'll record a little voice clip, not even 30 seconds long, that will then get put at the very beginning. So kind of that enticing. So you mentioned some people will just grab an audio clip and put it at the beginning. I'll just do a little recap, kind of pull out some exciting things. That goes before my intro now. Then it's the intro, then we dive in.
Yeah.
Also reading reviews from your podcast. So some people do that. They'll start it off with pulling a review, which I think is a great thing to do. People love getting their name shouted out on podcasts. So, and then just letting your audience kind of hear what other people are saying, I think is fun. So that's always an option, whether you do it at the beginning or at the end or whatever. Do you ever do that with yours?
I do it usually at the end, if I do it at all. I wish that Apple Podcasts doesn't let people put their actual names in. It's always like a username, so I always find myself being like, whoever, Starshine 006 is like, thanks for this awesome review. But I do that on occasion, and it's always a great way to get more reviews. And that's the name of the game when it comes to podcasting. If you're trying to get your podcast, up higher in the charts and in search results and whatnot, then pretty much the heaviest weighted thing in the algorithm is going to be your ratings and reviews. So just getting those reviews, and you need to ask your listeners to leave those reviews. And what I even did when I first launched my podcast is I incentivized that. I incentivized, hey, go leave us a rating and review, and you get entered to win. I forget what I gave away in the beginning, but it was lots of fun, oily swag prizes and stuff. And that really helped me get bumped to the top of that search engine for sure.
Fun. Okay. So I'm inviting you guys to all go leave a review on my podcast since you're listening right now when you're done.
While you're listening, you can do it while you're listening right now. Just click that little, I think it's, what is it? Feedback button. I don't know. Apple Podcasts is always like moving things around, but it's in there somewhere. It's not hard to find.
Okay, perfect. And then maybe I'll give you a shout out on the podcast. So the giveaways, that's a fun idea. How did you then contact people, or
right.
Because if they can't submit a name, then it's just like they get it if they listen and got the shout out, like, oh my God, I'm star shiny things.
Right. Exactly. I basically did an honor system. I said, hey, go leave a rating. I think what I did actually was I set up basically a landing page for the giveaway. So, and it's been so long, I don't remember exactly, but it was probably like, hey, go to revolutionoilspodcast.com/giveaway. And you'll find all the instructions there. And so the instructions very clearly said, like, go leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, and then enter your name into this, the Google form or something, so that I could actually collect people's names. So it was a little bit of an honor system because I couldn't necessarily check it. I thought like, maybe I should ask people to screenshot their reviews and like upload them to their giveaway. But at the end of the day, the easier you can make things for your listeners, the better off you'll be. So I didn't want to make it too complicated. So I tried to kind of consolidate it down that way.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Okay. These are all such great tips for people that are just getting started. Or if you're like me and you've been at it for, 3 seasons and you're like, I need to make some adjustments and I need to make some changes. It's okay. It's never too late to like learn something new and apply it to what you're doing 100%.
Exactly. Yeah.
There is one topic I want to talk about before we wrap things up, and that is managing a podcast. And like, this is something I'm excited to talk about because for my first year of the podcast, it was a struggle to manage it. Like, I didn't realize how much work podcasting would be on my own doing it. And I did get some help with some basic edits, literally from the get-go. I think the first few episodes I did, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is taking way too long. So I had someone help me a little bit with that. But, how do you navigate through managing your podcast?
Yeah. Especially if you have an interview-based podcast, that is like a separate job in itself, is just always being on top of setting up those interviews. It's a lot of work especially if you do, like I do, I have a weekly podcast. So I need a new face. I need someone new to interview every week. That can be a bit of a time burden. So in the beginning, when I was first starting out, like I said, I was on a shoestring budget. I had no extra cash. The only thing I decided from the beginning I was going to outsource was the sound editing, because I knew I did not want to be spending hours and hours on GarageBand. Like, GarageBand is a very basic audio editing software. You can't even do the like fancy things that I know my editor does with sound volumes and buffering. And I don't even know what all the terms are because I never learned it. I decided I was going to outsource it from the beginning. So I found someone on Upwork who charged about $30 an episode to edit my show, which was a very reasonable rate. Mm-hmm. And then everything else I did myself. And I probably worked about 25 hours a week in the beginning, because it was all so new and I didn't really know how to manage and have systems in place. Once my podcast grew and was profitable, which took about, I'd say 6 to 8 months before it was sort of, paying for itself and then some, then I was able to outsource and hire an assistant to take over lining up interviews and things like that. But I know, Krissy, you're like the systems queen. Like you have so many strengths. Systems, not so much my strength. I'm a good manager though. So once I've outsourced, I've been able to manage my people to be like, okay, here's what you need to do every time we have an interview. But I know you are like the systems queen. So I'd rather kind of you answer this question and tell us your system for podcasting.
Sometimes I create really good systems when things break. And that's definitely what happened. I mean, you say, oh, I've spent 25 hours on your podcast. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the entire time that I have available to work at all,
right? Yeah.
On 2 businesses.
And for the record, I only do about 5, not even 5 hours a week now, but
okay. Amazing. Amazing. I do 4 hours a month to release 4 episodes that are about 40 minutes.
That's impressive. Yeah.
So, but that was not me in the beginning. The system broke. So, and my listeners that have been listening for a while, they know that there was a period of time where like, I literally had to stop recording. And I do find that a lot of people will start a podcast and it's like, I'm going to put out weekly episodes. And then all of a sudden, like, there's not an episode that week or, a month goes by. And it's like, because it is a lot more work if you're doing everything by yourself. And so it was actually, I was never ahead in my podcast. I was always recording episodes literally the week of. So they were releasing on Fridays originally. And so it would be like Tuesday or Wednesday. And I like didn't have my episode done. I had someone editing. They're like, I need the episode. Or I would record an interview and, that Monday, and it was supposed to go out that Friday, and then they would cancel. And I'd be like, shoot, like I was too embarrassed to tell them like, oh, this was my episode this week and now I'm screwed, So then I would have to record.
I don't want to sound desperate and be like, are you sure you can't do it like tonight?
Right. It's okay. You're not that sick. You'll be fine. Right? So when my dad passed away suddenly in August, I had to take a step back from some things in my business. And you had mentioned before, for some of us, our podcast is just an extension of our business, another way for us to connect with people. And so I think a lot of people listening to this out there, that's probably where they're at because they want to do that extension of their business. So you have a lot of other things going on. Your podcast can't take up half of your, 20 hours a week, right? So I had to take a break from my podcast, and it was a year exactly a year into my podcast. And I was, like, oh, this is a lot more stressful and wasn't as fun as I wanted it to be because it was just like I was always racing against the clock. And I really liked the recording aspect of it, but everything else surrounding it was just too much. Right. And I was like, the only way I'm going to be able to bring this podcast back is if I create a bulletproof system that literally removes me from as much as I possibly can and eliminates me from all of the things that I don't like to do. That's always my recommendation. Right. You guys have heard me say it time and time again. The best way to enjoy your work for eternity is to get rid of the things you don't like doing and just focus on your zone of genius, the part that you enjoy, like sitting here chatting with Sam. Like I get such an energy rush from it. Like it excites me. I'm going to be on a high for the rest of the day. So that's all I want to do. So I took the time that I had off to set up a system to figure out, okay, how can I take these things that happen in the beginning? And like you mentioned with interviews, there's a lot that goes in play. Collecting all of the information from, the person you're going to interview. So you have everything for the show notes. You have the bio for introduction, setting up the time to record. I used to okay, let me look at my calendar and go back and forth on, trying to figure out a time that works. That can all be eliminated with automation through having a few things set in place, a form to collect information that automatically sends them to, the calendar where they can book with you. So just setting those things up and then literally just being able to pull up my notes. My VA has all the training and it's not that much training, to pull the information from that questionnaire, put it into my notes so I can literally pull it up, 5 minutes before the episode, review, okay, this is what we're talking about. Here's the bio. Perfect. Let me read through it once so I don't mess it up. Here's the freebie. We like connect about that. Like Sam and I even did it like, okay, is this the freebie that you still want to offer at the end? Yep. Check. Okay, we're good to go. And then as soon as I'm done recording, I'll record that little intro clip that I do before. I'll just put those files in a folder, send a note to my VA, and boom, she can take it from there to put it into the platform that we use where they take care of everything, the editing, the graphics for promotion, marketing stuff, the graphic they'll make for Sam to promote as well to her audience, the audiogram, they'll create the blog post and the show notes, they'll upload it. Like literally everything is done, you guys. I'm not joking that I literally just show up, record, I create a few things within like 15 minutes and then I'm done. And that's the only way that this is able to continue to go on.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. You're
yeah.
a rock star. I'll share one difference in my system that some people might appreciate, just knowing some behind the scenes stuff is I always print out my prep sheet. That's what I call so the sheet that you're probably looking at on your computer that your VA put together that has all, my bio and what we're going to talk about. I have her make that into a Word document for me. And then I print it out old school and I've got it sitting on my desk when I'm recording. That way I can make really quick time notes. So, if I feel like the interview starts to drag, or maybe this is more often than not, it's more like I laughed really dumb there or something, or like my response to their answer was stupid. And so I'll kind of I'll jot the timestamp down. It'll say, 12 minutes or whatever. So then after I'm done recording, in post-production, I can go back. I don't have to listen to the whole episode to be like, what did I want to fix about this episode? I just wrote it down as we were recording, and it makes the post-production so much easier. And that's if you're kind of anal like me. Like I really like to cut out as much fluff as I can. I like to go back and make me sound smarter than I am sometimes. And so I'll re-record certain sections, and it makes it so much easier to do that. So I've done that since the beginning. I could not live without my printed out prep sheet and pen.
Okay. And so time stamping, I used to do this. I did not set a timer. I have done this before, but I tend to forget. For that time stamping purpose, if there's something that you want to note for the editor, you're going to, want to know where. So what are you using to keep track, to know that timestamp? Are you using your phone with like a timer, a stopwatch timer on it, and you just hit start when your video starts, or what are you doing?
No. So what I actually do is I record all of my interviews on Skype. I'm a little bit anal, as I said, about my sound quality. And I just find that the sound quality recording on Skype is just a little bit higher quality than on Zoom. And so I've got my recorder app it was, I think, $60 or $50 one-time purchase to buy this recorder app that lives within Skype. So then I just hit the record button on there, and it has a timer built in. So I do that. But lately also what I've been doing is I record that, but then I also record my own track and voice in GarageBand as I go. And that's got a time clock at the top as well. And the reason I do that is just I get a little bit better sound quality if I record directly into GarageBand. And then for the Skype part, I just take the guest that I'm speaking to, I take their audio and I throw it into GarageBand when I'm done and line up those audio tracks later. So I've kind of got two time clocks going, but I try to hit record in both spots at the same time as best I can. So they're pretty close together.
Cool. That's a great tip. That's an awesome tip. I also like to have a pen and paper kind of down on my desk for if the person that I'm interviewing is saying something pops into my head and I still want to, stay focused and listening, right, but I want to circle back to like, oh my gosh, I'll forget if I don't write it down. So I literally just have to write down like 2 words, and I try and do it like we do video. So, I'm kind of like looking down. You might see me looking down if you're watching on YouTube, but just kind of making that little note to then come back. So I do think that that's a great tip, especially when you're getting started out, kind of getting into the groove of things.
Yeah.
But you guys, it's never too early to get a good system in place. If I had started with a system, it would have saved me a lot of headaches on that. And it's something that I have found that to be such a struggle with so many podcasters that I was like, I have to make my system available. So by the time this airs, I'm super excited that my scalable podcast system literally is available for people to get their hands on. And I know that we'll include that link in the show notes to give you all the tools and training that you need to literally set up a flawless system so you can show up, record, and be done. We don't want you doing 20 hours a week on your podcast.
No, not at all.
Gosh, amazing. Is there any other, advice that you want to give for someone who's just starting out or someone who's like, I just need some help with my podcast. It's not going as I wanted.
Yeah. My piece of advice I give to all beginners is prioritize that SEO, that search engine optimization, over coolness when it comes to what you name your podcast, what you name your podcast episodes when you're first starting out. Really think about who are you trying to reach and what kind of terms, what kind of keywords are they going to be searching within their podcast app? Because as hard as it is to get to the top of the search engines in places like Google or Bing or those big search engines, it's actually not that impossible to get to the top of search results within podcast apps. So I knew from the beginning I wanted to reach people who might go onto a podcast app and search the term essential oils. So what did I name my podcast? The Essential Oil Revolution. I didn't name it Unicorn Tears or Bottles of Potion Magic or Sam Loves Oils. I named it the Essential Oil Revolution. And that has done more for my success than any other thing. Mm-hmm. So another example is like, in my book, I talk about my fake student who wants to start a podcast about Scrabble because they love Scrabble and they're the best at it. And they're going to teach everyone how to beat everyone else at Scrabble in a podcast. I was like, wow, there's so many clever things you can name your podcast. You could name it Tile Talk. You could name it, I don't know, like one of those weird, like XO words that are in Scrabble. But, if I were you and I was starting from zero, I would just name it the Scrabble Talk Podcast or something, because you want to have those keywords in your title. And then also keep that in mind for your first couple episodes, especially. Don't make them clever sounding, just like really take advantage of the keywords that you're using to make yourself findable. Once you're more findable, then you can get a little more creative and clever with your titles. And you can even change your name later if you want to, although I wouldn't really recommend it.
I know that's something that I've talked with someone recently about, like, should I change my name to this podcast? It's interesting because so many people, like, when they hear the name Badass is the New Black, they're like, oh my gosh, that sounds so cool. I love that name. And I'm like, but it literally doesn't describe, anything of what we talk about and teach about on here.
It's not really doing much for your SEO, but your show's kind of more of an extension of your existing brand, though. Like, you're kind of driving your own traffic to your show, which is different than someone like me who is so niche and so targeted. I really needed people from anywhere in the world to be able to find me. But one kind of trick that you might want to think about doing, Krissy, is you've got the name of your show, Badass is the New Black. You can put a little bracket after that and then try to stuff a couple keywords at the end, network marketing or business strategies with Krissy Chin. You could tack that on to the end of your title in the official Apple Podcast title section. And that could help you a lot. You used to be able to do a lot of keyword stuffing in Apple Podcasts, but they've gotten a little stricter about that. So if you submit your name to Apple Podcasts and you're doing a ton of keyword stuffing, they might reject you, but it's not a big deal. You can just resubmit with a different name. It's not like you're banned from Apple Podcasts forever from keyword stuffing. But I always recommend, like, stuff them in if you can, because it could help you. And, have your cool name first, put a little bracket or a little dash, and then put your keywords at the end.
So it's not like hashtags where you can just, Badass is the New Black. Coaching, marketing, online business, entrepreneur life, like
with Krissy Chin.
Right. All these 30 things, right? With Krissy Chin. Okay. So I like that because I wouldn't have to change, the logo or anything on that. Like, it's really just Badass is the New Black, but for searchability, that's a great tip and trick.
There you go.
To be able to, in the platform, kind of add something like for course creators and membership, or entrepreneurs or, whatever, to make it a little bit more specific. Yeah. You guys,
that's why you need to buy this book, you guys. It's got all these easy tips in it.
Is it on audio yet? I have the book, you guys. I have the book. I should have had it in front of me. But I'm an audio girl, so I really need it on audio.
I know I'm an audio girl too, but for some reason, like this book also has like checklist in it. It's got action step checklist. It's got places for you to take notes. It's got links to tutorial videos. Like I take you behind the scenes of my podcast through the links. Like there's even, what do you call those, QR codes for people to just be able to scan. So I've thought about turning it into an audiobook, but I would definitely, there would be a lot of like, this part of the book, go to this website address to find YouTube video for this, like I'm not sure how that would translate.
I think it's fine. I'm going to put in my vote for an audio book and just tell people like buy the book and the audio so that you have these things or maybe, I don't know, like if they buy the book, could they get some type of like something automatically where it gives them like a list of the websites or something.
Right. Like having the resource page. It's all figure outable, but honestly, it just seems like a lot of work. I haven't done it yet.
Okay. Well, that's fine. You're an author. So that's amazing. You got a book out. Like I'm not even there yet, but working on it. So kudos to you. If and when the audio comes out, you can let me know and I will the first to download.
Yeah. Well, actually my identical twin sister is a professional actress. So I've always joked if we do the audiobook, then she'll probably be the one that reads it because it'll sound like me, but it'll be way better.
Oh, that's amazing. Not everyone has that luxury. I love that you're going to use what you got.
When you have an identical professional actress twin, you use it, right?
Exactly. Oh my God. Amazing. Oh, well, this has been enlightening. I've learned so much. I want people to continue to learn from you. So you do have a freebie for them. It's how to pitch, book, and crush podcast interviews. So that you can share your gifts and connect with your kind of people. So even if you were telling me before we started that even if you don't have a podcast and, aren't doing interviews, that this is going to be helpful because it will allow you to get on other people's podcasts or teach you how to do that. Right.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You don't have to have your own podcast in order to go on as a guest to someone else's podcast. And being a guest on someone's podcast is one of the best ways to reach new customers because it's a long form type of medium. If people are tuning into a show, they already know, like, and trust that host. So the host bringing you onto their platform is essentially transferring that trust automatically onto you. And then you also get this opportunity to tell your story and share your knowledge and share your value with those types of people. So I have a 1-hour training. It's completely free and it teaches you how to research the type of podcast that would be a good fit for you to go onto. And we get really clever with this, like different ways for you to think about how you can package and, package your skill set or your story and pitch it. And then we teach you how to pitch it to podcasts that are out there. And we give an email template for that, a follow-up guide. And then we also give some tips on how to crush that interview because there's definitely things that you do want to do and don't want to do when you go onto someone else's podcast. For example, you always want to end with a freebie so that you can allow that relationship to continue with the people that you've just shared with. So for example, I hope I can continue my relationship with all of you. If you go download my freebie, that's going to allow me to continue to get to know you and you to get to know me. And that's how you can take the most advantage of that opportunity of being a guest on someone else's show.
I love that. And I'm going to probably have my assistant also do this because I would love her to go, pitch me more on other people's podcasts because that's a great way to get more exposure, for your podcast. If you start one, it's also kind of a perk like, hey, you can be on my podcast, I'll be on your podcast. But also if you don't have one, yeah, absolutely. Getting more exposure is essential for your business. And yeah, love podcasting. Love the fact that we didn't talk about this, but when you create podcasts, people listen to old episodes. I mean, we kind of like mentioned it, but it's kind of like the effort that you put in and people listen, re-listen, to things you put out 3 years ago, which
Yeah.
is so valuable. I mean, talk about maximizing your efforts.
Yeah.
Right. So you guys go download Samantha's freebie. I know she's working on some really cool things. A Pineapple Podcast Academy, which is going to launch this year. So you're definitely going to want to be on her list so you can be in the know with all of the things with that and all of that coming.
Yeah. And the best way to find that freebie is just through my Instagram. Honestly, I've got a link tree set up for my bio, and there's just that resource right there. I think it's just called How to Pitch, Book, and Crush a Podcast Interview. But my Instagram is at Sam Lee Wright, and that's LeeWright, Sam Lee Wright. So it'll be there. Also, my website, SamanthaLeeWright.com, has a resource tab somewhere. I'm sure that you can find it there somewhere as well.
Awesome. You guys, we're going to put all the links in the show notes. So you'll be able to find it there as well. You'll be able to find Sam's website, her social media links, this freebie link, all the things. We'll even put her link to get her book in there. My Scalable Podcast System. You guys, it'll all be in the show notes. So visit those, grab all those links. Sam, it's been amazing to have you here. I've been enlightened. I know everyone listening have gotten some great advice to getting started or revamping their podcast. So thank you so much for spending the time to be with us today.
Oh, thank you so much, Krissy. It's been a blast. It's always good to see you. And thanks for letting me share.
All right. We'll see everyone later. Bye. Until next time, remember, done is better than perfect, my friend, and to channel your inner badass and take imperfect action every single day.